Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have a bit of a different show. We have our Ask Me Anything episode today. So these are questions that I have been provided by you as the listeners or along the journey in our day-to-day practice that I want to provide answers to you for in a quick podcast session. So today I'll run through a few and we will be integrating this into our podcast from time to time. Now, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, then please send it to us at podcasts@aspectlegal.com.au, and we'll put that link in the show note. Now, here we go with a very quick session for you. Vanessa, welcome to our Ask Me Anything.
This is a good space.
So, fairly new segment. Only had it the last 6 months or so. This is where you get the chance to ask me anything. What would you like to ask today, Vanessa?
Well, I think on my first question would be, I'd like to ask in terms of somebody who's selling a business. What are you actually finding when somebody comes to you to sell a business? What's their biggest struggle? And I guess, are they selling privately? Are they going through a business broker? What struggles are those business owners facing?
Yeah, most of, I'd say 80-90% of businesses that come to us are using a broker or corporate advisor of some description. There are, a component that won't be. Actually, maybe it's slightly less, because I guess included in there are businesses where sellers are selling out to employees, or employees are slowly starting to get equity in the business over time. We're helping them with, those sort of employee share arrangements and succession paths based on that. But, sort of 70 to 80% are have a business broker or a corporate advisor. And what are their issues? What are the concerns? I think one of the big issues is that, and we touched on this in a previous episode that we have recorded together, but the lack of preparation for sale and not fully understanding the process. And I think one of the issues is that depending on the business sale, on the transaction that has been negotiated, some of these can progress really quickly and easily through the contract phase with the right process. So we have a really strong focus on process and what happens where, and we're able to take clients through. But some deals can be complicated, and it's really important that sellers understand that possibility. And in one of our last podcasts, you talked about energy and sellers having energy, and that is a really important component, them having the energy to see out the process. So that's the first thing, not being fully prepared. Quite often, they completely don't understand the tax outcomes, and that can lead to difficult outcomes, because sometimes it means right at the end, when they finally realize they need to go and consult with their accountants or tax advisor, we have to change components of the deal. That can be really painful. And the last element is this risk of the buyer pulling out. We've had a lot of this in the last year. It's been far more prevalent in the last year than it ever was prior to that period. That for us is the one biggest thing that's changed post-COVID. It's an increase in my perspective, in the deals that we run. And we're running a lot of deals at the moment in buyers pulling out, and that is hugely, hugely painful for sellers. Obviously, quite often it's painful for buyers as well, because there's a multitude of reasons why buyers pull out. It's a huge issue, and there's no one answer to solve that, but yeah, that can be a real pain point. Sorry, really long answer. I'm not sure that was the biggest one, but anyway, there are a few.
It makes sense. And I guess that kind of, leads on to my other thought, or my other question is in relation to buyers. If somebody's going to buy a business, do you get many buyers, approaching you to assist with due diligence? If so, what size of businesses are they buying? And if they're not necessarily approaching you, what do you think the reasoning is behind that?
Yeah, due diligence is an interesting one. Due diligence is absolutely critical in a business. The legal due diligence element sometimes is really important, and sometimes, there isn't a lot of risk level sitting in the business itself. So it depends on the size of the business, the industry that the business is in, and the details of the transaction itself as to whether or not, as to how important due diligence is. When we're in a share sale environment, due diligence is always very important. When we're in a business sale environment, it depends on the industry size and those sorts of things. We are absolutely approached by buyers to help with due diligence. There's very varying levels of understanding about the why there is a need for due diligence and what that looks like. And I have a book that I've released recently where I really step this out in the buyer section as to what the role of due diligence is and why it's so important. And just as a snapshot, it's there to test that the value that you think that you're getting out of the acquisition is there, and to test that value will transfer, and to test that there are not other risks that you'll be taking on as a buyer from the business that you're not aware of. So that's sort of it's a value transfer and risk testing environment. And of course, there is no such thing as perfect, but we have clients who have bought, say, 100-grand businesses who need due diligence and have come to us for due diligence. All the way up to, I have clients that, aggregators that we work on for multi-million-dollar acquisitions who, sometimes don't feel that they need legal due diligence because they have their own process. So it all depends how much buyers understand the industry, understand what they're doing, understand the type of business that they're acquiring, how much they'll need from us. And we've actually quite recently, you and I talked recently on an innovation series. I love innovation, always about innovation. And so in the theory of innovation, I actually came up with a product recently called a basic due diligence product package, which we're now offering to the market. And I've only had it sort of in the current form that it's in for probably a couple of months, and buyers are loving it because it's a way that we can step out due diligence in a really easy way for them. Because one of the things that I have to say, so generally any transaction that is more than a few million, there will almost always be a solid portion of legal due diligence that goes with it. But the problem with due diligence from a legal perspective is, how long is a piece of string? Where do you stop in what you're actually looking at? And what I did with the legal due diligence package is create something that makes it really easy for small to medium size acquisitions, buyers in small to medium size acquisitions, be able to run a lot of the process themselves, be able to work out what needs review themselves, but also do that hand in hand together with a lawyer. And that's sort of the idea of a lot of products that I bring through Aspect Legal, is making the types of services that once only large organizations in large acquisitions had available to them, turning them into something that's cost effective and able and accessible for the SME market.
Yeah, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's one of those innovations that's definitely needed. I feel like buyers, they're just not, I don't know if taken care of is the right word, or it's just a lot of the time when they go to buy a business, let's say a business broker is the one brokering the deal, they kind of rely on that business broker to help them through the deal, if that makes sense. Like they communicate with the broker, and the broker's like, no, do this, don't do this. But there's such a conflict of interest there. Personally, I think, like, they're obviously selling that business, and I'm not saying they're working badly or there's any issues with it, but there's definitely a conflict of interest when you're telling the buyer what to do in relation to buy the business that they're trying to sell. So I think there's a lot of work there for a lot of, innovation there available for that independent, here's how you should go about it don't necessarily rely on the person selling the business to tell you how to go about it.
Yeah, well, and due diligence is actually this massive opportunity for a buyer to really get to understand the business in a way they may not have thought to get to understand the business. So I see it as a huge, huge, huge opportunity in terms of like getting that it's, you know, it is about risk management, risk mitigation, but it's also about getting that deep understanding of the business that you're about to be knee deep in. So, you know, and a way of pulling that, that corporate knowledge within the organization that you may not otherwise have asked or thought to get, you know, into depth on. So anyway, I think due diligence, super important, but in bite-sized chunks that are appropriate for the acquisition that you're doing.
Yeah, makes sense. That's brilliant. I think it's great. I think it's very much needed.
Thank you, Vanessa. I just want to say a huge thank you for coming into the show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jo.
Well, that's it for our Ask Me Anything episode today. I hope you found that useful. Now, we've got a few more of these style podcasts coming up soon. I find it invaluable to be able to answer these top of mind questions, whether they're from our guests, our audience, or our client. Now, if you have a specific topic or question that you'd like us to discuss, then submit your Ask Me Anything questions to podcast@aspectlegal.com.au, or check out the show notes to this episode where we will link right through to an email for you to submit your Ask Me Anything questions. And an important reminder that if you would like any legal assistance with matters that you're working on at the moment, then don't forget you can book in for an initial free call directly with our legal eagles at Aspect Legal by heading to our homepage at aspectlegal.com.au. Well, that's it for me today. My name is Joanna Oakey, and you've been listening to another wonderful episode of our podcast, proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. I am so very excited to announce that I've hit a non-podcast related milestone and released a book. You might wonder why? Simple. I wanted to help business owners understand the mechanics of deal making and the interaction between three critical phases of business: acquisition, growth, and exit. And so I am very happy to announce Buy, Grow, Exit, a guidebook for business owners and their advisors on how to buy, grow, and guess what? Exit in a way that maximizes value and avoids landmines along the way. The book is available now, so just head over to buygrowexit.com.au to get your copy and to access a whole heap of free resources that will really help you on your journey of acquisition, growth, and exit in your business or in working with your clients. Also, check out our show notes where we will link straight through to that page.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.